think you can beat Joe Biden?
Well, I'm leading in almost all of the polls against him. I'm leading by a lot, much more than Ron is leading. Ron's losing to him in many of the polls. I think we beat him by a lot. I don't know that he's going to be the candidate, but if he is the candidate, I think we'd beat him by a lot.
Do you have a plan to get independents and suburban women to believe that your policies will make their lives better?
It's called safety. It's called the border. It's called a strong military. It's called low taxes and low interest rates.
That was a First on Fox exclusive interview of former President Trump with Maria on Sunday Morning Futures. A new Morning Consult poll has Trump and Biden neck and neck in a potential 2020 rematch 2024 election. Joining me now is Pollster, Maslansky and Partners president and author of Persuasion, Lee Carter. And also joining me is Stagwell chairman and CEO and former senior advisor to the Clintons, Mark Penn. Good morning to both of you. Let's start, Lee, with you. Your reaction. This new poll, this Morning Consult poll, it's kind of the same story if you put up Biden against DeSantis as well. It's the same issue. Your reaction?
Well, I think they're so close, and we're seeing that in all the averages. When you look at the Real Clear Politics average, the 538 average, they're within 0.2 points of each other. So I think this is a real race. And when you look, again, at some of the states that matter most, like I'm looking at Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, those are all toss-up, too. And I think a lot of folks think that Biden's going to run away with that. That's not the story I'm seeing. And my expectation right now is that Trump's almost underperforming what he would in these kinds of polls as well.
And also, too, Mark, if you look at what President Biden is running on, that's Bidenomics. But there is a scathing New York Post editorial about the fact that the economy has actually suffered substantially under President Biden. How does he overcome what Americans are feeling at the grocery store, feeling at the gas station?
Well, it's a long way to Election Day. And people really vote on what the economy is like pretty much on the basis of the summer going into the election. So that's an entire year for the economy to improve. And, I thought Biden had a pretty good week last week. Sweden into NATO, inflation down, more people predicting soft landing. So, of course, on the economy today, most people are unhappy. The economy a year from now, a lot can happen. When I ran 1996, we turned around attitudes towards the economy in that critical 6-month period at the beginning of next year, almost 180 degrees.
Well, and, certainly it does come down to financing and to money. And we just got all the results had to be given to the Election Commission on Saturday for their fundraising. So the 2024 candidates did announce their second quarter fundraising results. So President Biden raked in $72 million. Former President Trump brought in $35 million. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis brought in $20 million. So, Mark, your thoughts on how much money President Biden brought in? Obviously, he is the incumbent here. And then you've got the Pence campaign struggling. Go ahead.
Well, we'd always used to talk about the money primary during this phase because generally the candidates are not getting the opportunity to talk to the voters. They're really talking to the donors. And so obviously that's an excellent haul for President Biden, a decent haul for the former president, and pretty good haul for Governor DeSantis. I think obviously Pence is so disappointing that he looks less than viable at this point.
Lee, your reaction as well. I mean, certainly, yeah, that $1.2 million that Pence raised at less than $1.2 million, that certainly does, lag behind his rivals. But Tim Scott seems to still be rather strong when it comes to fundraising. DeSantis, although there is now concern that Ron DeSantis' campaign is spending too much money. There's apparently going to be layoffs or have been layoffs at his campaign. That is a big piece of whether or not you're going to be president. How much money you can get and what your ground game in Iowa is going to look like.
DeSantis does seem to be slowing while others seem to be holding steady. And I think Pence is a real disappointment. But I think a couple things that we need to remember. Biden's numbers of $72 million also include donations to the DNC. And that's a big difference. Republican candidates don't get that same benefit. So his numbers are somewhat inflated if you look at that. Also, important to keep in mind that Donald Trump is the #1 donor among individual donations. He far and away gets those small donations under $100. And so that makes up a large number of people that's really making up his donation base. And DeSantis, I think, should be concerned because he's slowing, and I think that isn't a good signal for him. Now, all that said, at this point in 2015, Jeb Bush far and away was the biggest fundraiser, and yet we saw how he performed. So I'm not sure that the donor class is the same as the voting, as the voters.
And Mark, you already said that. Look, that we are early in. It's, I say, first inning of the baseball game. And on our screen, Mark, is all of the 2024 GOP presidential candidates. It is a big crowd. The first debate is August. If you ask any one of them, they will say, absolutely, I'm going to be on the debate stage. Pretty sure not all of them are going to be on that debate stage, Mark. But, you've got experience in this. This is certainly early, but it is all about Iowa. And then you've got Super Tuesday. You've got New Hampshire. Where should they be focusing their spending right now if you were advising Republicans, which you don't, but I'm still going to ask you the question.
Look, it's all about, can you get some momentum in the early states? Donald Trump simply has to hold on to his lead. DeSantis has to show surprise upside momentum. Tim Scott has to say, well, I'm really the candidate of potential here, and you're going to see me come out. And will there be a surprise? When I did my very first poll in 1976 presidentially, we had left out Jimmy Carter. And I turned to my partner and said, we should stop the poll. He said, forget about it, not realizing that he would become the nominee. So a lot happens. We are not even at the end of the beginning here. And a lot of people want to declare this over.
Yeah, Lee, I remember, we've talked about this off camera. I remember where I was in July of 2015. I was at a lovely winery called the Trump Winery, and it was myself and one other correspondent interviewing this businessman that at the time nobody thought had a chance in the election. It was all about Jeb Bush. Lee, things change, obviously. And from a polling perspective, things change.
Yeah. Things changed significantly, and right now we don't really even know which lane each of the candidates is going to take. So I think Donald Trump, he's made his lane obviously very clear. Ron DeSantis, we weren't sure if he was going to be the freedom candidate or if he was going to be the woke wars candidate. I think he's still trying to figure that out. Everyone else is still trying to figure out what does it mean if they are president, and we can't answer that question yet. I think Tim Scott is carving out a lane of optimism and hope. The others are sort of alternatives to Trump, and yet we're not sure exactly what does it mean if they're president. And so that's what their job is going to be, starting on the debate stage in August and continuing on throughout, on how would we be better off if they were the candidate. And they have a big case to make because most people don't know.
Mark, there's been some kind of talk and buzz about a third-party candidate out there. How likely do you think that is? Because even on the Democratic ticket, I mean, obviously President Biden is in the lead and he's the incumbent, but you've got RFK Jr. that's making a lot of noise, Marianne Williamson making a lot of noise. The Biden administration being very clear, the campaign, he will not be debating those two. But then you've got this discussion about a third-party candidate. I actually was interviewing Chris Christie last week. I asked him, would you consider being a third-party candidate? He said, absolutely not. I don't want to be the spoiler, but it could happen.
Well, look, I don't see Marianne Williamson or Kennedy taking on Joe Biden. I think he's got a firm hand. My wife runs no label, so I'll defer any comment on a third-party candidate, other than to say that right now both candidates are underwater and need to, if they don't want a third-party candidate, need to improve their ratings in the middle of the electorate of this country.
All right. Well, we'd love to have your wife come join us next time when you're with us, Mark. Real quickly, I'll give you last word on this.
I really think it depends who the candidate is going to be in the third party, but I think the third party is likely to hurt Joe Biden more than he's going to hurt Donald Trump. Donald Trump's polling numbers stay he's got a pretty solid and secure base no matter what happens. And so depending on who that third party candidate is, I think it's likely to pull more from Joe Biden than it would be from Donald Trump. But we'll see. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. That's what makes it so interesting. Lee Carter, Mark Penn, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you both.
Great to see you.
Thank you.